Hi everyone, welcome to Human Anatomy and Physiology. Today we will discuss about muscular system, and we will start with the muscle tissue. As we already discussed before, that there are three types of muscle tissue. The first one is skeletal muscle, and this skeletal muscle primarily attached to the bone, and this is the one that contract and move the skeleton. It is striated or striped, and it is voluntary. The second type is cardiac muscle tissue, and it is located on the wall of the heart. It is also stripes and involuntary. This means that we cannot really control the contraction of this cardiac muscle. It will contract automatically. And the last type of muscle tissue is the smooth muscle. And the name is telling you it is not striped, so it is smooth, and it is involuntary. They are usually located on the wall of the hollow visceral organs, like the GI tract, respiratory tract, urinary tract. They're also located on some places, like in the skin. There is a smooth muscle called the arrector pili. On the eyes, we also have smooth muscle called the iris, and the intrinsic muscle, and also sphincter smooth muscle. So we're gonna compare these three different types of muscle tissue. Again, the skeletal muscle, it is long cylindrical muscle. Okay, it's long cylindrical muscle. It has stripe. Okay, because it is long, then each cell will have more than one nucleus. There are many nucleus in one cell. Again, they are attached on the skeleton. The function is to produce body movement, stabilize the body position, and also increase body heat during shivering. And mostly the movement or the contraction is voluntary. It means that we can really control this skeletal muscle movement. So we can really move our hand, our legs, including the tongue. So the tongue is also skeletal muscle because we are able to move this muscle voluntarily. The second type is cardiac muscle. It is branching muscle. Yeah. It also has stripe. It is shorter compared to the skeletal muscle. Therefore, it only has one nucleus per cell. It has more mitochondria compared to the skeletal muscle. I think it is because the cardiac muscle never stop contraction, so they really need ATP for this contraction. Therefore, it has more mitochondria. Location is on the wall of the heart, and the main function is to pump the blood, so regulate organ volume. In this case, is the heart volume. The contraction is involuntary, so we cannot really control this contraction. It will contract by itself automatically. The last one is smooth muscle, and this is the only one that look like spindle. Yeah, so this is a spindle muscle, shorter compared to the skeletal muscle and cardiac muscle. Therefore, it only have one nucleus per cell. We don't see stripe in this muscle. Okay, so this is why it's called a smooth muscle, no stripe. Okay. They are usually located on the wall of the hollow organs, like GI tract organ, esophagus, stomach, intestine, respiratory tract, the trachea, bronchus, bronchioles, urinary tract, like ureter, urinary bladder, urethra. They are also located on the eyes, like in the iris. Okay, iris is the smooth muscle that control the opening of the pupil. The pupil is the holes on our eyes that let the light enter into our eyes. So it's controlled by iris. There is also intrinsic ciliary muscle. This is the one that control the lens accommodation. So when we see object in focus, this is because of this intrinsic muscle control the accommodations of the lens. And there is also arrector pili muscle. It is located on the skin. It is the one that actually causing the hair on the skin become erected, especially when, for example, when we see a scary movie, then there is a goosebump. It is because of this arrector pili. And there is also sphincter muscle, usually at the end of the tract. And the main function is, of course, for the one that's located in the hollow organ, will be used for regulate organ volume, and also movement of substances within the tract. It is involuntary. It means that you cannot really control this smooth muscle. Okay, this is the properties of muscle tissue. So every muscle tissue will have this property. The first one is excitability. So excited, it means that the muscle able to respond the chemical stimulus that coming from the neurons, which is called the neurotransmitter. So the muscle will respond to the neurotransmitter that is released by our nervous system, our neuron. Conductivity is mean that each muscle cell able to propagate electrical signal within the membrane. So there is a conduction inside the muscle itself. And of course, contractility. This is the main function over here, which is the muscle able to contract. Contracts mean actually to be shorter. So shorten, and then it will generate the force, whether pumping the blood or moving things with our hand, kicking with our leg, for example. It is actually the function of the contraction. And extensibility, ability to stretch without damaging the tissue. So the muscle also stretching, which is become longer. And elasticity, ability to return to the original shape after being stretched. So it has this elasticity. So these are the 5 properties of muscle tissue. Now we start with muscle tissue number 1, which is the skeletal muscle tissue. So if we see, if we have meat, that meat is actually muscle. So that meat is actually consists of many fascicles. So this is one fascicle. This is another fascicle. This is another fascicle. Inside the fascicle, there are a lot of muscle cells. So one over here, I'm going to use different color. So this one is muscle cell. Muscle cell, muscle cell. So consists of this fascicle, consists of many muscle cell or myofiber. So if we take one of this fascicle over here, then there will be one muscle cell over here. So this is If we take one muscle cell, this is long muscle cell, usually skeletal muscle is very long. Then what is present in the muscle cell, its muscle cell, there is a fibril, okay, which is filament. It's called the myofibril. Okay, and each myofibril consists of filament. It's called the myofilament. So basically, this muscle tissue is just like a cable that has a lot of cable inside it, and there is a lot of metals, filaments inside the cable. Okay? So the myofilaments that is really important for muscle contraction is called the actin and myosin. So these are the two filaments that important for muscle contraction. Now, if we look at one individual muscle cell, so a muscle cell, sometimes it is also known as myofiber, sometimes it is also known as myocyte. Okay, remember, cyte means cell, myo means muscle. So myocyte, myofiber, muscle cell, it is the same name. Okay? Why it is called the myofiber? Because it is long fiber that's covered by sarcolemma. Now, you see, the name of the plasma membranes of muscle cell, it has special name. It's called the sarcolemma. Regular cell is called the cell membrane. Okay. And this sarcolemma is actually two or double layer that will make tube. And this tube is going down into the cytoplasm. This look like T, okay, like T letter. So therefore, it's called the T tubule. Okay, the cytoplasm of the muscle cell also has special name. It's called the sarcoplasm. It's not cytoplasm, but it is sarcoplasm. That consists of many myofibrils, which is the myosin, the actin. There are also myoglobin. This is oxygen binding protein. So the oxygen will also carried by this myoglobin inside the muscle cell. Of course, nucleus, if it is skeletal muscle, it will be more than one nucleus. Mitochondria, this is special reticulum in the muscle cell. It's called the sarcoplasmic reticulum, or SR. And the primary function of this SR is for calcium storage inside the muscle cell. Okay, so SR function is calcium storage. And there is also glycogen. This is actually glucose, okay, or sugar storage inside the muscle cell. So it has its own protein that carry oxygen, is called the myoglobin. It has its own special reticulum that used for calcium storage, is called the SR, and it has its own glucose or sugar storage, is called the glycogen. So this is special for the muscle cell. Each myofibril consists of many contractile units. This is really important. So the unit of contraction of muscle tissue or muscle cell is called the sarcomere. So this is the unit that really perform contraction. There are millions of sarcomeres in one muscle cell. So when these millions of sarcomere contracts together, then the whole muscle cell will be contracted. So this is sarcomere over here. So this is one sarcomere over here. So it is bordered by Z-like structure. Okay, so it's called the Z-disc. So this is one sarcomere. and it has the thick filament. Is thicker, is called the myosin, and it has thinner filament over here, is called the actin. So this is one sarcomere. This is another sarcomere over here. Will be another sarcomere. So this is a long fiber that consists of many sarcomeres. This is how the muscle cell look like. Okay, so again, if it is one muscle cell over here, okay, so it has membrane, is called the sarcolemma. Okay, remember the name of the membrane is special for muscle cell. Okay, sarcolemma. Okay, and then the inside, it is called the sarcoplasma. Okay, so it has many nucleus. This is one nucleus. So this is skeletal muscle. It has many nucleus per cell. It has special structure that used for storage of calcium. It's called the SR, okay, sarcoplasmic reticulum. Okay. And then it has special protein that carry oxygen. It's called the myoglobin. Okay, it has special storage for glucose. It's called the glycogen. Okay. Of course, it has organelle that produce the ATP, the mitochondria. Okay, if you see the sarcoplasma, it has double membrane. In one place, that double membrane go inside to the sarcoplasma and creating this T letter. So this is what we call the T tubules. Okay, and of course there is a fiber, a long fiber. Its boundary over here is from this Z structure to another Z structure. This is one unit. It's called the sarcomere. Okay, and this is another unit of sarcomere. This is from Z to Z. This is another sarcomere. This is another sarcomere. Okay, sarcomere. Okay, and then if you see the sarcomere, it has the thick, so the thick filament that attached to the middle protein over here. That thick filament is called myosin. Okay? And then you also see the thin filament, which is this one over here, that attached to the Z disc, okay, to the border. Okay, so this thin filament is called actin. Okay, so these are the two main filaments of the sarcomere that's used for contraction. We will see the process later. Okay, so just remember actin and myosin is the filaments in the sarcomere that used for muscle contraction. Now, how it look like the sarcomere? Again, it is bordered by the Z disc. It's called the Z disc because it looks like Z letter. Okay, and in the middle there is a M-line protein, and this M-line protein anchor the thick filament, which is the myosin, and the Z disc anchor the thin filament, which is the actin. Okay, so this is one sarcomere. And then if we make it bigger, that its sarcomere, then you will see the M-line protein is here in the middle. Okay, so this one, the M-line protein, is anchor the thick filament, which is the myosin. Okay, and if you see myosin, it has head, many head. This is what we call the myosin head. Okay, and then if you see the Z disc, which is it's also protein that border one sarcomere with another sarcomere, it anchor the thin filament. So this is the thin filament, which is called the actin. Okay, so this is how the sarcomere look like. If you see under the microscope, it's going to look like this. So you see the border, the stripe over here, because of the arrangement of the actin and myosin. Actin is the thin filament, and the myosin is the thick filament. So you see the stripe. You see stripe under the microscope because of these arrangements of the actin and myosin. When it is relaxed, okay, if you look at this distance between Z disc with the other Z disc over here, so one sarcomere, during relaxation, it has this long distance. When it is contracted, then what happens? It becomes shorter. Okay, it becomes shorter. When it is fully contracted, like this becomes even a lot shorter. So basically, when the muscle contracted, the sarcomere is become shorter. So what happened is actually this head of the myosin will pull this actin to the middle. So going to the middle over here. Okay, so going to the middle over here. Okay, so when it is contracted, then what happened? It is become shorter. This is under the microscope. This is relaxed from one Z disc to another Z disc. So we can measure this. It is longer. And this is when it is contracted. So the one Z disc, one sarcomere is become shorter. When it is fully contracted, it's even become more shorter. This is the shortest distance. Okay, so this is how the sarcomere contracted. Again, the myosin head will pull the actin into the middle. So when it is pulling that, then the Z disc distance between one Z disc to another Z disc will become shorter. Okay, now we're gonna learn the three main proteins in the muscle. Okay, three main types. The first one is called the contractile protein. This is the protein that really gives contraction. I mentioned before, this is going to be myosin and the actin. But there is another protein that regulates that contraction. And and there are two of them. It's called the tropomyosin and the troponin. And there are some other proteins called the structural protein that give strength and also proper alignment on the sarcomere, like a titin. Yeah, this is like a spring type of filament. Myomesin, this is the one that's located in the middle, the M line. This is the one that anchor the myosin. Nebulin and dystrophin, this is another two protein that will maintain and reinforce the sarcomere. Now it's going to be look at the closest picture over here of myosin. So this is myosin. Okay, this is thick filament and it has head. It's called the myosin head. Okay, this is actin. So the actin filament is actually bead-like filament. Okay, so this is bead proteins. Okay, look like a ball. Okay, round proteins. Okay, and on that actin, it has dot over here. So if you see the dot, that dot is called the myosin binding site. So that is used by the myosin head to bind. So myosin head will bind to this dot. Okay. Now during relaxation, this dot or the myosin binding site will be covered by this long protein, and that long protein is called the tropomyosin. Right? So because it is covered, then there will be no contraction because the myosin head will not bind it. It will not be able to pull the actin. Okay, so that's the tropomyosin, the regulatory protein that cover the myosin binding site. There is another protein on the actin complex. It's called the troponin, and this troponin has the calcium binding site. Okay, so troponin has calcium binding site. So what does that mean? It means that whenever the calcium binds to the troponin, it will make the tropomyosin open the binding site, and then the myosin head will be able to bind the actin and will be able to pull the actin into the middle. So what does this mean? It means that for contraction, we need calcium. Okay? Without calcium, there will be no contraction. Okay. Now, the contraction of a muscle cell is called the sliding filament theory, because according to this theory, again, this actin and myosin will be sliding one another. So basically, the myosin will pull the actin to the middle, will be sliding to one another. Okay, so this is the sliding filament theory. Just remember that the length of the actin and myosin will not change. They have the same length. Okay, so it's, even though it is shorter, this sort of sarcomere, but the length is still the same. Okay? The reason it is become shorter because the this is actually moving to the middle. Okay, but the length of the actin and myosin stay the same. Now the question is how this contraction began. And remember before that muscle cell, it has the excitability. It means that it can respond to the neurotransmitter that is released by our nervous system. So basically, there is an order or control from nervous system to start the contraction. Okay, the special neuron is called the motor neurons that will go to the muscle tissue or muscle cell, and it will release the neurotransmitter into that muscle cell. Okay? That neurotransmitter is actually special. It's called the acetylcholine. So this is the one that will be released into the muscle cell. And the acetylcholine then will have a receptor on the muscle cell. It will open the sodium channel, and sodium will enter into the sarcoplasm inside the muscle cell. Okay. Inside the muscle cell, inside the sarcoplasm, is using the sarcolemma T tubules in order to go to the sarcoplasm. Inside the sarcoplasm, it will trigger the release of calcium from the SR. See that? Okay. So the calcium is needed for contraction, right? It will bind to the troponin. However, to be released, it's require sodium. Okay? Sodium. And sodium entered the cell because of this acetylcholine, the neurotransmitter that released by our motor neuron. So basically, the order of muscle contraction is coming from the nervous system releasing the acetylcholine. Acetylcholine open the sodium channel, sodium enter into the cell. It will trigger the release of calcium from the SR. And then that calcium will bind to the troponin. When it is bind to the troponin, tropomyosin will open the binding site, the myosin binding site. Therefore, the myosin head will be able to bind to this binding site and then start the contraction cycle. So this is how the contraction begins. This is electron microscope showing us the motor neuron, the nervous system that go to skeletal muscle over here. So this is area, what we call the synapse. Okay, so the area between the motor neurons and the muscle tissue. And in this synapse, this motor neuron will be releasing its neurotransmitter. It's called the acetylcholine or ACH. Okay, that's the name of neurotransmitter released by the motor neuron in this synaptic cleft between the neurons and the muscle. And this cleft is called the neuromuscular junction, NMJ, neuromuscular junction. Okay, so again, I'm gonna put the process over here step by step. So let's say this is our brain, this is our spinal cord. So brain, spinal cord, and then from spinal cord there will be neuron called the motor neurons. Okay, so this is motor neuron. Okay, this motor neuron will release the neurotransmitter. This neurotransmitter is called the acetylcholine, ACH. Okay, now on the muscle tissue, a muscle cell, there will be receptor for the neurotransmitter, for the acetylcholine. So whenever the acetylcholine binds to this receptor, it will open the sodium channel. Okay, and just remember there are so many sodium outside the cell. Okay, so when the sodium channel open, can I use different color for sodium? So the sodium will enter into this cell, but it's gonna be using this tube, this tubule. It's not directly go to the sarcoplasm. It will using this. So it's a positive charge, right? Sodium is positive. It will enter into the sarcoplasm using this tubule. Okay, then it will enter into the sarcoplasm. Remember, inside here, there is a sarcoplasmic reticulum, this is SR, when there are so many calcium in it, because this is calcium storage, right? So when the sodium enter into the sarcoplasm, it will trigger the opening of calcium channel. Yes, this is calcium channel on the SR. When the calcium channel open because of this sodium, then calcium will out from the sarcoplasmic reticulum. Okay, and it will bind to the troponin. Okay, when the calcium binds to the troponin, tropomyosin will open the binding site. Then the myosin head will bind to the actin. Now, in order to contract, it's required ATP, and ATP is made in this mitochondria. Okay, so this is mitochondria. Okay, and in order to make ATP, we need oxygen plus the glucose. Okay, it will enter into this process and finally produce the ATP plus the waste products with the carbon dioxide and water. Okay, and this is the ATP that will be used for pulling the actin by the myosin. So this sarcomere will contract it whenever we have the ATP. Now we're gonna list the chemical that is needed for this muscle contraction. We start with the neurotransmitter that is released by the motor neuron. It's called the acetylcholine. Okay? And then the acetylcholine will bind to the receptor, open the sodium channel. So another one that we need is sodium. Sodium will enter into the sarcoplasm using the T tubule. It will trigger the opening of calcium channel in the sarcoplasmic reticulum. So we need calcium over there. And then in order to contract, then we need the ATP. This is the energy for contraction. And remember, ATP made from or produced from glucose plus oxygen. Okay, so this is also molecules or chemical that needed for muscle contraction. Okay, really important. Acetylcholine, sodium, calcium, ATP made from glucose and oxygen. Okay, this is again the step-by-step process of muscle contraction. Start with the motor neurons that release the acetylcholine on the synaptic cleft. It will bind to the receptor. It will open the sodium channel, and sodium will enter into the cell, trigger the opening of this calcium channel. So calcium will release from the SR into this space. It binds to the troponin, bind to the troponin over here. It will make the troponin open the binding site. When it is open, then the myosin head will bind to this binding site. If there is a ATP, then it will pull the actin into the middle. That's contraction. Now, how about relaxation? When there is no acetylcholine release anymore, what happens? It will trigger the removal of calcium back into the SR. When there is no calcium available in the sarcoplasmic, then what happens? The troponin will let the tropomyosin to cover the myosin binding head, binding site. Therefore, the myosin head will not be able to bind to this binding site, and the muscle will be relaxed. Okay, so this is how the contraction and the relaxation happenings are occurring in a muscle cell. Now we go to the contraction cycle. Remember, in order to start contraction, after the myosin head bind to the actin, the myosin binding site on the actin, it requires the ATP. Okay, so ATP will bind to the myosin head. It will cause the myosin head to attach to the actin, making what we call the cross bridge. So ATP will hydrolysis and make the myosin to attach to actin, causing what we call the cross bridge. And then whenever the cross bridge present, then there will be power stroke, which is the pulling, the pulling of actin by the myosin. After pulling, then there should be detachment. Otherwise, that contraction will stay. It's called the tetanus. It has to be detachment. In order to have detachment, then another ATP has to come to this myosin head in order to detach. So basically there are two ATP that is needed for this cycle. The first ATP will be used for pulling the power stroke, and the other ATP then coming after that in order to detach the cross bridge. the cycle keep repeating whenever the calcium is available on the sarcoplasm. Okay, so again, we start with this cycle over here. Okay, the first one, okay, the ATP will hydrolyze. When it is hydrolyzed, then this head, myosin head, will bind to this binding site, making what we call the cross bridge. So this is what we call the cross bridge. And then after that, the ATP, or after hydrolyze, will also pull the actin to the middle. And this is what we call the power stroke. Okay? In order to detach this bridge, a new ATP has to be produced and attached to the myosin head. So whenever ATP attached to the myosin head, it will detach the bridge. Okay? It will release the attachment. And this is what we call the detachment of the cross bridge. It's require an ATP. Now, how the relaxation happening? Of course, our muscle will not contract always to perform contraction. It will also perform relaxation. Contraction, relaxation, contraction, relaxation. Relaxation is due to the acetylcholine that is released into the synaptic clefts will be removed. Will be removed by special protein. It's called the acetylcholine esterase, ACH, and it will remove the acetylcholine for the synaptic cleft. Therefore, acetylcholine will not be available. If it is not available, then sodium channel will be closed. Sodium will not enter into the cell, and then the calcium release will be also closed because no sodium inside the cell. And then the active transfer pump will pump the calcium back into the SR. And then calcium bonding protein, calcicutrin, will help hold calcium in the SR. So it will stay in the SR about 10,000 times higher than calcium concentration in the cytosol, in the sarcoplasm. And then myosin-tropamine complex will recover the binding site. It will cover the binding site. Therefore, the myosin head will not bind to it. It will relax the muscle. So there are several agents or chemical that able to change these contractions in the muscle tissue. Like for example, Botox, botulinum toxin, it is produced by bacteria. It will block the release of neurotransmitter from the motor neuron. What is the result? The muscle will not contract. It's called the paralyze. Okay, it will paralyze the muscle. And it is bad if it is actually paralyze the diaphragm, which is the muscle that used for breathing. It actually will cause the people that have the infection of this Botox die because of they unable to breathe. Okay. As you know, that Botox is usually used for removing wrinkle, right, in the face. So what is wrinkle? Wrinkle is actually muscle contraction. Okay, so when Botox is injected in the wrinkle area, then the wrinkles will be removed. It's actually paralyzed. Okay, so wrinkles is contraction. It can be paralyzing by this Botox injection. So this is used by several medical field, okay, for removing wrinkles or maybe during the surgery in order to paralyze the muscle. There is another chemical, it's called the curare, and this curare is actually come from plant. It is a plant poison chemical, okay, from poison arrow. It will block the acetylcholine receptor. So maybe acetylcholine will be released by the motor neuron, but the receptor is blocked by the curare. And what's the result? It's going to be the same like the Botox, is paralyzed because there will be no contraction because sodium will not enter into the cell, and at the end the calcium will not be released from the SR. There will be no contraction, paralyzed. And the last one is neostigmine. This is actually anticholine esterase. This is the one that will actually block the acetylcholine esterase, the enzyme that removes the acetylcholine. Okay, so when this enzyme removed, what happened? The acetylcholine will keep available. Okay, keep available. When the acetylcholine keep available, what does that mean? The contraction will keep going. Okay, so what is the result? It's going to be what we call the tetanus. Tetanus means the muscle that keep contracted. Okay, so these three chemicals, they are sometimes used in medical setting for surgery. You know, sometimes surgeon need the Botox or curare in order to paralyze the muscle during surgery, and sometimes they also need neostigmine in order to make the muscle contracted during surgery. Okay, now we go to the muscle metabolism, which is the production of the ATP. Remember, ATP is required in order to start the pulling of the actin by the myosin head. Now, where the ATP coming from? There are four sources in the muscle tissue, in the muscle cell. The first one, there are free ATP that usually available in the sarcoplasm. This is usually that will be used for, they will use first for contraction. So any available ATP in the sarcoplasm will be used first for contraction, but they only available maybe about for maybe less than 2 seconds or 3 second contraction. So it's really fast, it's gone. And then the second one will be coming from the ATP storage in the muscle tissue, in the muscle cell. It's called the creatine phosphate. This one maybe will make the muscle to contract about 10 seconds. Okay. And after that, ATP storage in the creatine phosphate will be gone. Okay. But sometimes it is enough for a runner, a sprinter, especially 100-meter sprinter, to use creatine phosphate to contract their muscle during running. So there are some people that use this creatine phosphate. So they buy the creatine phosphate from market. They take it in order to increase the ATP availability. But again, it's maybe only for 10 seconds. Now the rest, if we need muscle contraction for more than 10 seconds, maybe minutes or even hours, then we have to provide ATP from cellular respiration. Okay? So aerobic cellular respiration, which is the glucose and oxygen. So they are needed for making this ATP. Okay, so this is what we call the aerobic. Air means oxygen. Okay? Aerobic cellular respiration that will produce ATP for longer muscle contraction. And this is the main source for our contraction. Okay? And then if we continue, for example, exercise, we may be gasping, and what happened, the oxygen will be very difficult, so we breathe difficultly, and the oxygen will be used for organ that is important, like the brain and the cardiac muscle, okay, the heart. Therefore, the skeletal muscle will not receive the oxygen, but the skeletal muscle still be able to produce ATP, okay, using process, what we call the fermentation or anaerobic cellular respiration. Okay? So production of ATP without oxygen. Okay? Without oxygen to produce this ATP. But the ATP produced from this fermentation is really low in number, only 2 ATP per glucose. While using the aerobic respiration, we able to produce at least around 38 ATP per glucose for glucose molecule. This one and only 2 ATP per 1 glucose molecule. Okay. So again, these are the 4 main sources for muscle contractions in the skeletal muscle. Okay, we see the creatine phosphates. Remember, I mentioned before that creatine phosphate is kind of storage for ATP in muscle tissue. So when it is needed, it can be converted into ATP. And this ATP then can be used for muscle contraction. If it is not needed, if we still have ATP, it can be converted back to the creatine phosphate. This ATP, extra ATP, can be stored in this creatine phosphate. If we need it, then we're going to use it to produce muscle contraction. It's only 10, 15 seconds. Okay, for 100 meters sprinter, maybe enough for them to sprint for 100 meters. And this is the primary source for our contraction, which is coming from the aerobic oxygen. Using oxygen, cellular respiration. Again, glucose plus oxygen will produce ATP. And this is used for any contraction over 30 seconds, maybe minutes or even hours. And it is provide about 90% of ATP used during our contraction. And again, this is how it's happening. Again, the main molecules that used for making the ATP is the glucose, okay, plus oxygen. Then it's go to the mitochondria and it produce the ATP. If we don't have enough glucose, sometimes that can be also coming from the fatty acid, the energy storage that we have. So glucose will go in here, okay, into pyruvic acid, and finally making it. If we don't have, also we can use it from amino acid. So protein can be used for making ATP2, but it is only happening when we don't have glucose in our system. But if we still have the glucoses, then the fatty acid, amino acid will not be used. It will keep in the storage. Now this is anaerobic respiration, which is called the fermentation. Again, the glucose will be used for glycolysis, and it's only produced 2 ATP and produce the 2 lactic acid that will go to the blood, and it can actually poison the blood. So it is not good for the blood. Okay, so usually we will not perform this fermentation for a longer time. This is the reason why we have what we call the muscle fatigue. So exhausted. The muscle will stop performing contraction if we do not have any more oxygen in our system, because the production of lactic acid will causing our muscle to stop. It is poisoning our muscle and blood. So the primary factor, so this is actually protective mechanism in order to keep our muscles in a good shape. Otherwise, it will be broken if we continue contraction. So there are several contributions. This is coming from central fatigue feeling in our brain, and insufficient of acetylcholine from the motor neuron, depletion of creatine phosphates, decline of calcium, which in the sarcoplasm, insufficient oxygen and glycogen, and remember this, the buildup of lactic acid will also causing the muscle to stop contracting. This is what we call the muscle fatigue. Okay, now we go to the next discussion, which is about the motor unit. Remember, there is, let's say this is brain, this is spinal cord, right? This is a motor neuron that go to the muscle cell. Okay, so this one motor neuron, sometimes they go to 10 muscle cell or sometimes 1,000 muscle cell. Okay? The other over here, let's say this one, maybe only go to maybe 10, 20 muscle cell, while the first one over here, 1,000 muscle cell. So each of these is called motor unit. So motor units mean one motor neuron that innervates group of muscle. So if you see here, there are 2 motor units in these figures. So the first one over here, this motor neuron, innervate 1, 2, 3, 3 muscle group. This is one motor unit. This is another one motor unit over here that only innervate 2 muscle group. This is another motor unit. So there are 2 motor units in this picture. So again, one motor unit means one motor neuron that innervates group of muscle. Okay, could be 10, even sometimes 2,000 muscle cells in one unit. Okay, now how the muscle contractions happenings, how it look like if we use what we call the myogram. Okay, we can actually check the graphic or the graph how the muscle contracted. Now, when we use this myogram, it will give us 3 stages over here. Start with the latent periods. This is the time when the calcium being released from the SR. It's about 2 milliseconds. It's really fast. It is in millisecond, not only second, it is millisecond. 1 million less than second. 2 milliseconds for latent period. And then after that, boom, there is a contraction. So it's contraction when the sliding filaments is actually happening. So when the actin and myosin, the myosin pull the actin, causing this contraction period, usually happening around 10 to 100 milliseconds. And then after that, boom, going down, is this relaxation period. This is happening when the calcium is actually returned back to the SR, sarcoplasmic reticulum, and it takes about 10 to 100 milliseconds to perform this. So this is the contractions look like in the myogram. This one contractions over here is called the twitch. One twitch of contraction. Okay, and usually if only one twitch like this, it will not be meaningful. In order to make a meaningful contraction, we need to have a lot of twitch that coming together in order to give this strong and meaningful contraction. Like this. So we need what we call the wave summation in order to give the meaningful contraction. So wave summation basically is one twitch over here, and then another twitch will come, and then another twitch will come, another twitch will come. So a lot of twitch together. So the contraction together that happening before relaxation of the first twitch, and then finally it will give us this strong contraction. So this is the really contraction that we have when we contract our muscle. For example, when we're contracting our biceps, so it has many twitches that apply one another after one another, and finally give this strong contraction. For some places, there is also what we call the motor unit recruitment, where the multiple motor units will perform contraction together in order to create not only meaningful but also skillful contraction. Example, when we're moving our finger, our hand, for example, for doing something, there are actually many motor units that work together to contract several muscles together, coordinate muscle together to give us the meaningful and skillful movement. So this is what we call the motor unit recruitment. So the next one is muscle tone. This is involuntary contraction of small number of motor units. And usually our back, we have muscle tone like this. So some muscle keep contracted. So this is what we call the muscle tone. Because it will keep the muscle firm even though it's relaxed. Usually doesn't give a movement. It's just like, for example, it will make our posture in balance. There is no movement on our back, for example, but our posture will keep like that because of this muscle. So it is essential to maintaining our posture. And also for the smooth muscles in the blood, it's important to maintain the blood pressure. So the muscles in the blood vessel, for example, it keep contracted, because to maintain this blood pressure. Now we're gonna see two main type of contraction. The first one is called the isotonic, and the second one is called the isometric. Okay, so isotonic, there are two types, whether concentric or eccentric. Okay. Now, what is concentric? This is the contraction that we usually use when we moving object. So this muscle over here will be contracted to move the object. So the object will be moving. This is what we call the concentric muscle contraction. Okay. The second type of isotonic is called the eccentric. This is when the object is actually really heavy. We try to move it up, but we cannot. We cannot do it because it's too heavy, for example. But our muscle over here is contracted, which is trying to move this one. So this is what we call the eccentric. Okay, eccentric. The last one, it is isometric. It means that we actually keep something in our hand without moving it, but our muscle will contract it actually. So keep these things in the place. So this is what we call the isometric contraction. Okay. So again, the concentric contraction means when we move the object with our muscle contraction. Eccentric, we are unable to move the object, but our muscle contracted. Sometimes because it's too heavy, the object actually moving away from what our contraction. And the last one, isometric. This is when we keep something in our hand and our muscle keep steady doing the contraction in order to keep this thing on this place. Okay, so that's the two main type of muscle contraction. Now we go to the classification of muscle fiber. Sometimes, people talking about white meat, okay, white meat, okay, and red meat. What is this? Okay, red meat. So when we compare about, chicken and beef, cow, then the red meat is cow, right? And the white meat is chicken. That's correct. Now, if we compare this white meat and red meat, then we will be able to see really what happened with the the muscle cell. So red meats mean it has more slow oxidative muscle type. It's gonna have a lot of myoglobin, because a lot of myoglobin is become red. Okay, so more of this red color on the meat. Okay, so the cow meat or beef will have this more ratio of this slow oxidative twitch muscle. Okay, between the let's go to the white meat, which is fast glycolytic. This is this one over here. This is white meat. Okay, it has less myoglobin, so therefore the color white. Okay, so chicken will have more this ratio of this meat, type of fast glycolytic. Between them, there is what we call the pink meat. It has combination of red and white. It's become this pink type of meat. It has more myoglobin compared to white meat, but less compared to the red meat. Okay, the same thing with human muscle. It is the exercise, how we perform our activities daily will really make different ratio in our muscle. Okay, so people that perform a lot of activity, usually, they have a lot of white meat. Remember white meat, chicken, they are very active, right? So they can move there, but they usually easily get tired. Okay, so the white meat. The red meat, so people that stay, don't really perform activity, like cow, for example, they mostly uh, staying down, but when they perform activity, it can be longer and stronger activity. Because what? Because they have more red meat. Okay, so that's the difference between white meat and red meat. So people that usually perform a lot of activity, they might have more white meat. The one that using for strong exercise, they usually have more red meat. Anabolic steroid, this is a chemical that's similar to testosterone. This is a hormones, sexual hormone produced by testicle. So this is male hormone. The function of testosterone is to increase muscle size. So remember, size is not number. So everybody actually have the same number of muscle cells, whether they are builder or the one that very skinny person, they have the same number of muscle. The one that make different is the size. Okay? So bodybuilder have bigger muscle size. And testosterone can be used to make this or to increase the muscle size. With bigger muscle size, it will give strength. It gives strength. But using anabolic steroid, this is kind of shortcut to increase muscle size. And there are negative side effects of using the steroid, anabolic steroid. It can increase liver cancer, kidney damage, heart disease, mood swing. Like for example, if it is female that using it, it might be moving their mood from female to male-like characters. Facial hair for female, it increase production of facial hair, and also change the voice on the female. It's become deeper like male. Hey, how are you? My name is Anna, for example. Okay, so that's a kind of side effects of steroid. And atrophy of testicle, because testicle is the one used for making steroid. If we take it from outside, then the testicle will be smaller and sometimes can causing the sterility. So for male, okay, it's very important. Do not use anabolic steroid if it is not really necessary. And also increase baldness, because testosterone can also increase the baldness. So some sport people, they sometimes using this anabolic steroid, and you can maybe see from their characters. Okay. Okay, now we go to the cardiac muscles. How it look like? Cardiac muscles is a little bit square shaped. It's not really cylindrical, but still the same long muscle like the skeletal muscle with stripe, and the stripe is coming from actin and myosin arrangement. Okay? And then the border is called the intercalated disc, the border between one cardiac muscle with another cardiac muscle. And because it's shorter than skeletal muscle, it only have one nucleus. But it has more mitochondria. That's very important. So cardiac muscle, it has more mitochondria because what? It's never stop. So never stop contraction. So it's require a lot of ATP. And the ATP is made in this mitochondria. So a lot of mitochondria in the cardiac muscle. Between the cell, there is intercalated disc, and it has a special type of junction. It's called the gap junction. So it means that the electricity actually can go from one cardiac muscle to another cardiac muscle using this gap junction. So therefore, the contraction will be transferred from one muscle, cardiac muscle, to another cardiac muscle very fast. Again, it is how it looks like. It's going to be the same. It has myofibril with actin, thin filament actin and myosin. So it's very similar structure with the skeletal muscle. And this is another specialty of cardiac muscle. It is called the autorhythmic cell. This means that starting contraction is actually not ordered by the nervous system. It is started by itself, auto rhythm. So the rhythm is started by itself. In the area is called the pacemaker. Okay, so there are a group of cells on the right atrium that will start this contraction, and that group of cells is called the pacemaker. And the contraction is usually about normally 75 times per minute, and it is never stop contraction. Therefore, it needs a lot of oxygen, and therefore it will have more mitochondria in order to produce this ATP. And then extended contraction is possible to the slow calcium delivery. So the calcium channel and the extracellular fluid will keep open. Therefore, calcium will keep entering into the sarcoplasm of this cardiac muscle. Okay, the last type of muscle, the smooth muscle. There are two types, visceral or single unit smooth muscle. This is usually the one that's located in the hollow organs, GI tract, respiratory tract. And there are multi-unit smooth muscle. This is the one that's located in the arrector pili, for example. Right? So what does single unit mean? Single unit mean one motor neuron, each innervate thousands of smooth muscle. That's single unit. Multi-unit mean there are several motor neurons that innervate several smooth muscle. So this is a multi-unit smooth muscle. And this is how it looks like. Why there is no stripe? So maybe you think that there is no sarcomere. There is still sarcomere in the smooth muscle. However, the actin and myosin is not really arranging in a smooth arrangement that gives stripes. Okay, so there is no stripe because this actin and myosin arrangement is not in a very good arrangement. Therefore, it's just a smooth muscle. It's no stripes or striations in this smooth muscle. And also, when it is contracted, it is kind of twisted. Okay, so it's twisted, become shorter. Just like you twist a rubber. So you twist a rubber and become shorter, and you let it go, it then going back to this regular shape again. Then relax and then twist it, which is contracted. So this is how the smooth muscle contracted. The process still the same, using calcium, troponin, tropomyosin, actin, and myosin. The contraction is slowly and lasts longer, so this is needed by our GI tract, respiratory tract, a continuous contraction and slow contraction. And there is a difference here. The protein that bind the calcium is not called the troponin, but it is called the calmodulin. Its work a little bit different because this calmodulin is actually activate the enzyme myosin light chain kinase that will facilitate myosin actin binding site. Okay, so the troponin is actually the one that will remove the tropomyosin from binding site, but this calmodulin is the one that stimulates the binding of myosin head into the actin whenever this calmodulin bind the calcium. Again, smooth muscle tone, as I mentioned before, it's going to be slow contraction and keep contracting. Okay? And this is needed in order to control the movement of contents of the hollow organs, like GI tracts, the food inside our organ, or blood vessels, the blood that keep flowing in the blood vessel. It has to be keep flowing by this slow muscle tone. Okay, we finished with all these muscles. Now we're gonna see how this muscle regenerate. Can they make a cell division? Remember, there are 4 types of tissue, right? Epithelial tissue, connective tissue, muscle tissue, and nervous tissue. And remember again, the epithelial tissue is the one that able to regenerate very easily. Okay? If your skin cell gone, it will be replaced easily. Connective tissue like blood, bone, when it is broken, it can be replaced also. However, muscles, only smooth muscle that can be replaced. Okay? If the blood vessel, for example, is smooth muscle being cut, it can be regenerated. It can grow again. The cardiac muscles and the skeletal muscle, it cannot be regenerated. It's become scar. Whenever it is broken, then it's become scar tissue. It will not regenerate to make a new skeletal muscle tissue or cardiac muscle tissue. So that's really important. That's the reason why when somebody's heart is broken, sometimes they need heart transplant because their heart is just broken. It cannot be regenerated. The same thing with the skeletal muscle. When it is broken, it's become scar tissue. Aging and muscle tissue. So skeletal muscle start to be replaced by fat beginning at age 30. So this is really use or lose it. If we use it, then our muscle become better. If we do not really use it, then there will be more fat deposited in around the muscle tissue. And we start to become slowing in our reflex when we are older. Also decrease the strength and change the fiber type from to slow oxidative fiber. So from fast, like chicken, the white meat. And when we get older, many of our muscle cell change into slow oxidative type of muscle tissue or red meat. Use or disuse the skeletal muscle. So this is special for skeletal muscle. Hypertrophy, this is usually for bodybuilder. They they force their muscles so much that making their muscles so big. And this is what we call the hypertrophy, enlargement of skeletal muscle. Atrophy, this is opposite. When we do not use our muscles so much, then the size will be decreased. Okay, so hypertrophy is so much, atrophy is so little use of muscle. Aerobic exercise will stimulate slow-twitch muscle fiber. Okay? The forceful exercise will stimulate fast-twitch muscle. Okay, so this is white meat. Okay, slow twitch is the red meat. Okay, so when we use the aerobic exercise compared to the forceful exercise, then our ratio of white and red meat is gonna be different. Some disorder, two main types of disorder of muscle. Myasthenia gravis, this is progressive autoimmune disorder. This means that our antibody is actually attacking our tissue, and they usually blocking the ACH receptor. It can cause paralysis. Okay, so paralyze on some area of our muscle. So this is myasthenia gravis. So our muscle become weaker. Most common on women, 20 to 40. With some thymus gland problem. Sometimes they have double vision and difficulty to swallowing. Some treatment using some steroid that bind to the ACH receptor. Muscular dystrophies, this is inherited. So this is genetic type of disorder when the muscle actually destroyed. So sarcolemma tears easily during muscle contraction. So this is carried by the X chromosome. Therefore, mostly appears on males because male only carry one X chromosome. So male is XY. If this X chromosome carry this gene, muscular dystrophy, then this male will have that problem. While female, they have X and X. If it is one carry the gene, there is still another X that cover this problem. Okay, so mostly male will have this muscular dystrophy syndrome. There are also some abnormal contractions. Sometimes we feel it like spasm, involuntary contractions of single muscle, boom. Cramp, this is a really painful spasm. Tick, this is involuntary twitching. Sometimes our eyelid just twitching is called tick. Tremor is a rhythmic involuntary contraction of muscle group. Fasciculation, this is involuntary brief twitch of motor unit that sometimes is visible under the skin. Some induced muscle damage, like for example, intense exercise can cause muscle damage. So if we never exercise and suddenly we exercise so much, then it can cause muscle damage. So really important, if you never exercise, do not start exercise with a forceful exercise. Do not force yourself if you never exercise. It has to be little by little. Sometimes there is a delay onset. This is usually happening after 12, 40 hours after exercise. Then we feel that soreness in our muscle and also stiffness in the muscle. The last one is rigor mortis. What happened with rigor mortis? So this is muscle that keep contracting when somebody died. This is the reason because when somebody dies, they will not produce the ATP anymore. Therefore, their muscle will keep in this power stroke. So keep contracting, because this ATP will not bind to this myosin head. So basically, in rigor mortis, this one is not happening. Relaxation will not happening. It's about maybe 24, 40 hours that muscles will keep stiffness like that. That's what we call the rigor mortis, like zombie, right? So zombie, the muscle stiffness. This is actually a type of rigor mortis. Okay, I think that's all for this muscle tissue. We're gonna continue again with more about the muscular system, especially the muscle organs. Goodbye.